Hi, I'm Joel Wanasek. I'm a pro mixer and the co-founder of nailthemix.com, the coolest place to learn how to mix music on the internet. And today, I'm going to do another one of these little rants here where I'm just going to talk about how to actually listen to music, okay? And I know this is kind of an abstract topic and you might hear that and you might be like, what the hell are you talking about? But no, seriously, like let's dive into this, because one of the things I see as a pro mixer and somebody who's taught other people how to mix and will continue to do so is the way that people listen to music. You know, just like in mixing, there's different levels to it, meaning you need to learn to listen. Okay, now what the hell does that mean? What am I talking about? Okay, I'll give you an example. I'm going to take a very famous mix. I'm going to take the mix on Appetite for Destruction. So I've been listening to this as I'm 41 years old as the date of recording this for, over 30 years I've been listening to that album. Some of the best rock songs ever written. And I never really thought much about the mix. I never really cared for it as an audio professional. It's like you can sit down and be like, oh, it's not like the snare drum is anything amazing or the guitar tones. But, obviously that has connected with tens of millions of people around the globe, worldwide. It's just an international hit. There are so many songs on there that are just phenomenal. So, in terms of the mix, we could sit here and argue hypothetically about the sonics all day. Should a snare drum be louder in the mix or quieter or this or that? Or, until our brains explode, we could argue about stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I finally, a few months ago, got that mix. It's kind of like a weird revelation for me because forever I'd listened to it. I never really thought much of it. I never really cared for it. Never thought it was like this great mix or anything. But a few months ago, I was sitting in the car and I was listening to it. And I changed the way that I listened to the song, okay? Bear with me. I changed the way that I listened to it. And then all of a sudden it clicked for me and I'm like, wow, this mix is incredible. I love this mix. And I was like, I got it. So what changed? All right. So the weird thing about doing professional mixing and recording and, being a producer, a mixer, an engineer, or whatever, is like, you think differently than society. Like society hits the play button and they're like, ooh, I like this song or I don't like it, right? And then you have the audiophiles out there there aren't that many who will sit there on their really expensive, $40,000 speakers with their $2,000 power cable. And they'll be like, oh man, the mid range, you know what I mean? Like you have people that actually care about sonics. But as an engineer, what happens is when you listen to music, you have a tendency to dissect it and analyze it. You're not listening as a normal listener like everybody else. People just enjoy the song and love the song for what it is. But as an audio professional, you're like, oh, I don't know about the delay on these vocals. Like the delay time feels out of time with the tempo. Or, that was sloppy guitar playing there on the right side of the speaker. Or, oh geez, that snare drum, I would have used a lower pitch snare or a higher pitch one. And I would have maybe increased or shortened the decay. You know what I mean? Like those are the stupid things that we think about. Obviously we're disconnected from reality. So one thing that I struggled with as a producer was to learn how to unhear all the stuff that I've been working very hard to be able to hear professionally and to turn that off and be able to actually listen to the music and enjoy it and really, really appreciate the different sonics. Thing for me that was like the big holy crap moment was learning to listen to the space between. What the hell does that mean? Right? The space between sounds, like how pretentious. The way to explain that is when you listen to music, you have three dimensions. You have front to back, right? Which is like depth. That could be reverb, but it's also the way that a bass instrument feels and moves, right? There's left to right, which is panning, right? And there's top to bottom, right? Which is frequency. So those are the three things. You have your bass treble, right? Your top to bottom, your left to right, which is panning. And then you have the depth, the back to front. And that, my friends, is what I mean by the space in between. So something has changed in the last 10 years, especially, is that modern tools and incentive cost bias and budgets going down. There's a number of reasons that we're not going to get into. We don't need to sit here and debate them. But there is one thing that's happened is that music has been made more and more and more digitally. And I went down that rabbit hole. So I've mixed, just for reference here, so you can see where I'm coming from. I've mixed full analog for 10 years. And I've also mixed full digital for 10 years. And I kind of did them in blocks where I started digital, then I got hardware and went hybrid for a while. And then I went digital for 5 years exclusively. And then 2 years ago, I came back and I bought a console and a bunch of hardware gear. And now I just bought even a bigger console. So I've gone through different revolutions in the way that I hear my own work and things like that. And the conclusion that I've come to is that something on the digital side, when we're mixing in the box, is getting lost and missed, right? And there is a certain emotional connection and an impact that digital doesn't quite have that gets lost in the translation. Now, what's weird to me about this is like, I can't prove it scientifically, but I can hear it as obvious as day. I can take any 4000 SSL plugin and I can put it on a guitar and it always sounds, within the same thing. It does a certain thing. And if I use the hardware strips that are sitting in front of me off the console, like immediately, there's a certain depth, a certain space, a certain width that comes in because of the saturation characteristics. So the way that analog electricity works is it changes the way that the speaker pushes and pulls for some reason. The cardboard cones we listen on that sit in front of us versus the digital. There's just a certain way that it moves air, and I can't explain why. I don't understand it, and I do own a software company, so I know how we model these things, and I also understand how far off the modeling technology is. But there's a way that things push and pull in analog. That it's a little bit different and feels different than digital. I mean, I've seen people do tests, for example, like Anti-Kipo. He's done bands like Children of Bodom, and he does a lot of these tests on his YouTube channel. It's really great. You should check it out. He'll play like an Iron Maiden song on vinyl on a turntable versus like a digital remaster. And you can feel the difference immediately, right? So there's a difference in formats and the way that things feel when you listen to stuff that's done. So as we've gone into the modern age and tools have become more advanced in the computer and a lot cheaper, it's led to more accessibility. But I feel like what I'm saying is that something has been lost. And one of the things that has been lost that I've really learned how to hear in the last year or two is the space between sounds. What do I mean by that? The way things sit in space amongst each other. If I have a guitar, a bass, and a drum, and I put it up digitally, I'm immediately going to start grabbing EQs because it's like everything is kind of like smeared and in the way of each other. Now, if I bring that up on my API console, which is sitting right here in front of me, which you cannot see, there you can hear me banging the faders. What's going to happen is suddenly, because of the saturation, I don't know, right? The characteristics, the signature of that console, it kind of spreads everything up. And I find myself using way less EQ and everything just feels better. And I can get a lot farther with fader balance. I feel like I use 30 to 50% less EQ when I'm mixing on hardware. I know that probably sounds crazy because if you've only mixed digital, you don't understand what I'm talking about. But if you have mixed on a board and you've spent some serious time comparing these tools and you've spent some years and your hearing has evolved, you'll be able to pick up the nuances of it. And there's a certain way that things feel. So I went through this whole journey and I did all the shootouts and tests as scientific as possible. And like, I just beat it to death for months and months and months. This is the conclusion I've come against on my own experience through just extreme testing and just sitting there obsessing and obsessing. I wouldn't have bought these tools if I didn't think they were superior sonically because they're definitely not as convenient and it's much cheaper and I have a stronger incentive cost bias to mix the computer. So that being said, I'm getting paid to care mostly about the product, right? The audio I put out and the quality and not the convenience of my workflow as a mixer. Okay, so all that being said, let's go back to listening to music. So this whole journey has taught me to listen to the space, meaning the depth of music, the back to front. It's hard to explain, but when you learn to hear it. So when I was listening to Appetite for Destruction, I was like, wow, I love how the snare just sits in the space and everything is separated, but it just works together and it's so clean. There's like a separation between the sounds that happens on these older records. That's really beautiful when you learn to appreciate it. When you crank it up, when you listen on low levels, high levels, things like that, that really, really, really is an amazing thing. So what I'm saying to you is if you want to get better at listening to music, you first need to find some good speakers. And since you're probably a producer, most likely watching me talk about production, sit down in your studio on your good speakers and hopefully your treated room and just listen to music and listen by decade from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 10s, and modern age. Now you're going to notice that trends come and go, things change, but there's different things about production because of the different types of tools and technologies people used, that's kind of special that you're going to fall in love with in every decade. To me, the peak mixes have always been in like the mid 2000s, especially like in the rock, because that's where I do a lot of my work. But in general, I think you'll find when you're listening to music that if you really take time to close your eyes and immerse into the emotional impact of the song and listen to the depth, like the back, the front, the way the bass playing moves the speaker or doesn't, digitally, the way that these things make you feel when you listen at different volumes in a good environment on good speakers, you experience, I think it's going to be really, really eye-opening. I know this is like super abstract and conceptual, but when you listen to the emotional impact of these songs. Listen to the way that they feel, the way that they move out of the speakers. For example, like everybody loves 70s recordings. I always never cared for the music. So, because, it's an age thing and I never got it, but I've been listening to a lot of 70s records in the last 2 years. And I just like, I love the sonics. Like there's something about it. There's a feel, there's an energy there, there's a vibe. And sure, you know, the mixes are outdated and by modern standards, they might not be as wide or as clear or whatever. You know, that stuff is all subjective, but there's something about the way those songs feel that's incredible. And when you learn to listen to that, you can appreciate it, you can admire in it, and it will help you level up as a pro. It'll help you understand, you know, different tools and how to use them and where to put them in your own work. So I highly recommend and challenge you to sit down and go listen to mixes from the decades. Like sometimes I'll go listen to like a band that's done by one producer and that's mixed hardware. And then like I'll listen to a modern version that's mixed by a different producer that I know is in the box 100%. And I'll compare the way that those mixes feel, the way they hit. And it's really shocking and eye-opening when you know that information and to listen to those mixes, because it's like you can hear that the mix is mixed technically brilliant and even probably more advanced than the previous years, but it doesn't always feel better. It doesn't always hit you the same. It doesn't pop out of the speakers and have this energy to it that some of the older stuff does. So I think that's something that gets lost. And like I said, in order to understand that, you need to sit down and you need to actually learn how to hear it. And more importantly, you need to be cognizant of it and you need to actually listen to it and do your homework. Because if you do that, you will go on a journey that will take your hearing from wherever it is and will pop it up and give you a new appreciation. Because like I said, one of the greatest challenges as a producer is to be able to turn this brain off, you know, your technical left brain, and be more creative with it, you know, and feel it more, right? The emotional side of things, because that's how people are normally listening to music. They connect with it. It represents something going on in their life, and certain songs get associated. And it's like, they're not sitting there thinking about, does the snare drum sound good? Is it saturated enough? Does it have enough space? So you got to learn to separate that stuff. And to do that, you need to listen to all decades of music, whether you like the songs or not, and learn to admire the nuances of the production. Listen to the depth, front to back, the left to right, the top to bottom. You know what I mean? Depth, the width, the size, the impact, the energy, the way it feels. When you learn to do that and you take the time to listen to those sounds, you're going to do better sounding mixes that translate and stand the test of time. You're going to have a much better shot of that in your own. I think it's super important. I know this is abstract and ranty, and I know some people watching this are probably going to be like, dude, you're crazy. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're wrong. But I'm telling you, if you do the homework, sit down, you really spend the time, you're going to probably come to the exact same conclusion I have. So I would say go back in time, listen to some music, learn a few things from those decades, because there was an amazing level of talent and production back then. Tools were different, the techniques were different, but those songs connected and they've lasted decades. Take the time to do that. You'll make better productions now, and you'll make better decisions and better choices. So I'm going to leave it there. That's enough philosophical rant and mumbo jumbo for me today. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. And if you like this type of content, thank you so much for watching. Of course, if you want to learn how to mix, check out nailthemix.com, the best place on the internet to learn how to mix music. Also, I'm always doing content on my TikTok and Instagram. It's @Joel Wanasek. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and happy mixing, everybody.